Hello there, everyone. I'm Doug,
And I'm Adele.
and we're co-authors with Claire and Scott Lowridge of the book called Spiritual Rhythms for the Enneagram, a handbook for harmony and transformation. And we've decided to do a series of Facebook Live interviews walking through the various numbers. And today we are going to be looking at the number 9. And so we're glad you're here. Welcome, Sylvia. And we will be trying to give you a little overview of some of the things that are descriptive of a 9 and how they interact with life. And as you're listening and watching, please feel free to ask questions, and we'll hope that we can discern them on the website one way or the other. In our framework, we're starting with the gut triad, so 8, 9, and 1. And we call that the GQ, the body or strength triad. And it's part of our body intelligence. And so we want to look at how our beloved 9s express the wonderful work of God in their lives, and what are some of the things that trip them up.
Well, I want to start by saying if I could choose any number at all, I would choose to be a 9. Because I feel like the 9 sits there at the top of the circle, arms around every other number, wanting to include and embrace and orchestrate peace. And they seem to be able to find something good in everybody. They seem to want to hear from everybody. And they just are like glue or peace in person coming into a room. And I just feel that the generosity of their presence when they are there, that I would like that peaceful nature instead of the more revved up nature that I have. And I'm aware that when I'm with 9s, and I'm particularly if I'm in board meetings or on teams with 9s, that we can wear them out because they find all the drama and conflict and egotism in the room, the rancor, just not what they want to deal with. And sometimes I have this image of 9s sort of trying to fade into the background. I'm really not here. I'm not going to take part in this discussion. It is really uncomfortable for me. And sometimes 9s might even stand up and say, you go along with your business. I'm going to go take a nap. I'm going to leave.
Another way they do that, frankly, is they just get very quiet. And if you ask them, so what do you think about this? They have a beautiful nod. It's a little bit like, have no clue what they're saying, but they're saying something. And often their internal turmoil that they are really not wanting to deal with will come out later. We've had a number of 9s on our elder board that will go unnamed, and we have a great discussions during the meeting, and they are sort of there smiling and sort of going along with things. And then late that night or early the next morning, we'll get an email that said, well, I didn't really agree with that question or that answer or that policy. This is what I really think. And that's one of the challenges for a 9 is, can I actually be present? So they're in the gut triad and have all the reactions, but their reactions, they don't really like their own reactions, let alone ours. And so sadly, their tendency is, instead of paying attention to those and owning them, they want to numb out. So for each of the numbers in our book, we've talked about what are some of the breath prayers, things that they can pray right in that moment as they feel themselves wanting to sort of drift away. One of the simple ones is, Lord, I'm made in your image, and I am not going to go to sleep. I'm going to stay awake. I'm going to be right here with you. And the great thing about these beloved 9s is, when they're able to make that choice with the help of the Holy Spirit, their presence sort of holds all of this discussion, and they're able to see a way forward. If they go to sleep, they don't see that. So it's a wonderful gift that they have.
And when when they do that, it feels to me like they can move a process along in a way that hardly anybody else can, because they're not manipulating the process and they're not pushing the people. They're just invitational. They're inviting people into it. But it's true that when they start to back away, that they step away from awareness, and when they're not aware, they do fade into the background. They do go silent. And actually, sometimes, as they go silent, I'm very happy when people go silent, and I prefer that to people making a lot of noise, and that comes from my own sort of dysfunctions. But I think we need to keep calling nines to show up, because without them, the process is much harder. I think about a beloved nine I know, and he's had to have some hard marriage discussions, and he doesn't like them. He doesn't want to engage in them, and he just sort of pulls back, and it really frustrates his wife, who wants him to show up and to engage and to, get into it, and let's come to some conclusion and let's move forward. And he would just rather wait her out until all of her energy sort of is dissipated and she's gone on to something else. And so the spiritual practice of made in your image, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be aware, I'm going to come forward and use my God-given voice, that's really stepping in to transformation for a nine. And it may feel better to hang back, but it means that they don't grow.
So we want to take a minute to say hi, Scott and Claire, our co-authors are watching, as well as Jolie and Luke. Glad to have you on board. If you have questions, please feel free to type them in. I think we see them as you write them, so we'll do our best. And we are speaking on behalf of Scott, so he will correct us if we get just too far afield. Thanks be to God for that.
Even in writing our book, so Claire's a 3, Doug is a 1, I'm a 4, and Scott was the 9. And he just was this presence in the wings that sort of moved things along, but never really took charge of anything. So he'd do whatever was assigned, and he did more than what was assigned. But it was just interesting to see all the energy coming from, particularly the 3 and the 4 in the heart I had.
So one of the other things that, as we think of the nines, first the positive and then the challenge they face is, as Adele said, her one of her favorite numbers is a 9, and I realize quite a number of my friends are 9s. And 9s happen to be the kind of people that are, as they are stereotyped, very easygoing, and they are able to, when they come into the room, they're often garrulous, I think, and they know how to connect with people. And it's interesting because they're still in the gut triad, and so in the end, your opinion is not going to drive them. They have their own mind, but they do want some sort of connection with you and create a little bit of a context of, let's just make sure everything's going all right. And so they,
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, I'm glad you're emerging. Come on, buddy, stand up. But the challenge for these beloved 9s, when there are tensions in a group, they can feel that in their body, and then they're not quite sure what to do with it. And the temptation really for each of the numbers is when we get to that little trigger point, when we start feeling that false self energy coming on, and we want to, in this case, with the 9s, draw back, numb out, don't feel those things. That's the exact place where we're inviting people to practice the thing that we call stop. First you see it, you start becoming aware, wait a minute, I'm checking out here. You realize I've been triggered by something, and maybe you take a moment and think, whose comment pushed me over the edge, or why am I doing this? But then you open yourself at that point and you say, okay, God, I'm opening myself, my head, what am I really need to think about here and remember? what's my heart say, my connection to people, and in my body, what's my body telling me? And in that, opening yourself to God's presence in that moment so you can stay present. And that's a lot of words for something that can happen in a very short amount of time. Particularly if you're able to catch it early, it gives you a chance to realize, hey, I'm starting to lean back inside. How do I get in there?
So just to go over the letters again, S is C.
Yeah, and T was the trigger.
T is trigger. O is open, head, heart, and gut. And P is be present, which means show up. I think about the passage in Luke 14 where Jesus tells the parable of about somebody who had a great banquet and invited a lot of people to come, and they made a lot of excuses for not going. And because of these excuses for not showing up, they missed a very important invitation. And I think one of the sort of growing edges for a 9 is to say, what important invitations am I missing out on because I'm not showing up? Where is God actually inviting me to engage, and I'm having a good time not being present? So,
and that can be an invitation to a party, which is hard to believe that a 9 would actually pass up, frankly, but somehow they do. But there's probably more significant invitations when, as Adele mentioned, your partner starts giving you clues that things are not all peaceful in her or his perspective. And at that moment, that's a place of, well, hey, can I, with God's help, show up here, or am I going to practice my normal self-defeating strategy of taking a hike inside? It can also be with your kids. There's tension with your children, or maybe discipline things. And how do you stay present to what's going on and not get to the place, this is the unfortunate things, when 9 sort of get fully frustrated, then the anger that's in their triad position comes out sort of as a surprise, because they're peaceful, mad, and the people cross the line, and all of a sudden there's trouble. And so the ability to get closer to the time of saying, I'm feeling frustrated by this, I think I need to lean in rather than lean back. And so the bottom line for a 9 is your presence actually matters here. And to believe that, and that it probably is even a great self-confession, is, God, my presence matters here. How do I need to be present here? How can I be? Where am I not being present here?
One of the wounds, childhood wounds, that may play into the 9's sort of pulling back is they miss out on the message that their presence matters. Maybe there were too many other things going on, too many other children in the family, maybe other crises or difficulties between parents, or just parents who worked a lot. And so there was this sense of, if they were quiet and if they sort of faded into the background, things went a lot smoother. And so there's this sense of not developing a sense of self, not developing a sense of, how do I participate? How do I engage? And often it's that wound when you're triggered by something else in a meeting. It can be about this residual memory of, my presence here doesn't really matter. I mean, these people will go and make their decision. Whatever they make is going to be it. And so you get this almost resignation going with a 9 until they hit the anger, and then the resignation goes. But for 9s to begin to say, where do I hear this message that my presence doesn't matter? And what would Jesus have to say about my presence in my marriage, or in my workplace, or in my church, or with my kids? How much does my presence matter?
I think, Lana, as you talk, or as you wrote there, it's a process of learning to believe that who you are really does matter when you show up. And I think for the rest of us who are not, at least as our primary number, nines, I think it's really important to find ways of affirming and encouraging them that they really do matter, and usually challenging them isn't quite the way to do that. But again, having several nines working in leadership teams, if they fall a little too quiet, I'll usually just say, "Hey, Susie or Fred, I'd love to hear what you're saying. I know you're thinking of things. What's on your mind? Tell me. We'd benefit from hearing." And frankly, most of the time, I've found that most nines are quite happy to respond to an invitation, but that little numbing instinct keeps them from taking initiative themselves. And so just calling them out, and then there's usually momentum toward being able to be part of that.
So I just want to give a shout out for the harmony for the 9, because we've talked about the 9 sort of fading into the background, not being active enough, not taking initiative. And the wonderful gift of the harmony triad, the 3-6-9, is that when a 9 goes to 3, they tap into action, they tap into energy, they tap into engagement, and they integrate that momentum that moves things along. And when they can move into 6, that's connection, to care about the people in the room, to care about what's happening, to care that they've answered all the questions and that there's trust being built. And so you have this wonderful synergy that happens when a 9 is engaged, and their peacefulness impacts team. Their peacefulness acts on people. And that's really a very simple way of beginning to engage in transformation for a 9, is to notice, how can I lean towards 3, or how can I lean towards 6 in this moment where I'm triggered to just be sitting on the dock of the bay doing nothing but watching the day roll away.
Amen. And I think again the wonderful in the 9-3-6 have had the benefit of being a harmony triad all along, but the interplay of those numbers is really for their health, and the more that beloved 9s can draw from each of those to be able to say, I can have the courage to speak my mind. My ability to get something done is possible. I can do all this. So all of those messages help build the wholeness of what 9s bring. And the wonderful gift that a 9 brings is, as Adele said, the integration. They see how all the pieces fit together, all 9 numbers. And they do it so intuitively. The rest of us, as we're watching, we're like, wow, how did you see that? But that's what they see all the time. And so it is a wonderful gift that they bring.
I also think we could say a word about sloth, which is the vice, pulling out, not engaging. The thing about sloth for a 9 is often they don't look lazy. There are times they're lazy, but they can look very busy. If they're engaged with 3, they're very active, they're doing a lot of things, but they're avoiding the conversation with their wife, or they're avoiding disciplining their child. They're avoiding the thing that is hard. And so I think sometimes 9s have a hard time self-identifying, because they feel like they're active and they're busy. And you are. And we value that you're active and busy. The point of transformation is always the point where we are least reflecting the image of God. And Jesus didn't back away from what was difficult and hard. Jesus engaged it. And so we want to encourage 9s to say, where is the sloth? The sloth piece. What is it you're really not wanting to engage? Because that is going to be a point of transformation for you.
And the other part of sloth actually it isn't just like having difficult situations and not face and not wanting to face them, which is true. It's also not thinking that your contribution means anything. So it can be just normal, healthy stuff that you can be less engaged in bringing forth. So sadly, the vice works all over you when you're unaware of it and not present. And so all of the times, every time you can practice stop to get closer and closer to seeing, how does this show up in my life? How does this preventing me from being fully present to God and myself and others? That process will begin to see all the ways that you can lean more fully into your own presence. Well, if you don't have any further questions, I think we'll wrap up, and we'll hope to continue the conversation on the page. Tomorrow, Claire and Scott will do the beloved number 1.
Go with God, you all.